Hey, everybody. Welcome into Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. I'm Lauren Screeden in for the great Jeff Joniak. Those are some big shoes to fill, but excited to be here with all of you tonight and thrilled to work alongside Tom Thayer. Later, our friend Jim Miller from SiriusXM NFL Radio will join us, and Larry Mayer, fresh out of the owners' meetings, or maybe the pool down there in sunny Florida. But either way, he's got some great stuff to share with us. But first, Tom, we're kicking it off with a big-time guest, new Bears linebacker Nicholas Morrow, joining us now. Nicholas, welcome to Bears All Access. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So you're part of the historic Chicago Bears defense now. A lot of pride in our defense in this city. You got a chance to visit Hallis Hall when you signed your contract. I know it was a total whirlwind, but what did you think of that first taste of Bears football?
It was awesome. I think the first thing you see, you can't miss it, is just the history. Like walking through the player entrance, seeing all the former players and the retired jerseys and stuff like that. So like the history hits you. But it's just an honor to be a part of the organization as a whole, honestly.
Have you met Tony Medlin yet, the equipment manager? And what number have you been given?
Yeah, I met Tony. He's fun, man. He's a good guy.
He's the best.
Yeah, I think I'm wearing 53.
All right. I thought I wanted you to wear 50. I played 8 years with Mike Singletary, and, I just think it would be a nice transition from a 50 to a 50. But, back in college when you were playing safety, did you know that you had a future at linebacker in the NFL, or did you think about maybe I could lose a little weight and stay at safety? What was your thought process from there?
Yeah, so when I played in college, we had an interesting defense. And so there was times where I played safety, and there was times where I went to the box. But if I was in the box, I did a lot of blitzing. In the last game of my career, I actually played linebacker because of the style of offense we were going against. So I've just been versatile. I've been able to play so many different positions. So really the biggest thing in transitioning was I thought that the transition from Division III safety would be easier going to linebacker than it would have been going from Division III safety to NFL safety.
So when you were in middle school, you were in the band.
Yeah.
Was that, and then you said that you were a little heavy, so they put you on the offensive line. So What's a little heavy to Nicholas Morrow? And number two, what instrument did you play?
Yeah, so heavy to me, I was like 180, but I was also like 5'10". So I was just short and stocky. It just threw me in there. But in the band, I played percussion. So I played the quints. I don't know if that is like the multiple drums.
Right.
And then I played a little bit of snare and the xylophone, bass. I kind of played it all, timpani, just depending on what time of year it was.
So Nicholas, is music still a part of your life?
Yeah, last offseason, I was teaching myself the piano. And I kind of put it down a little bit. I think it's in the garage somewhere, but I was teaching myself the piano on this little app that I use. And I still enjoy music. I don't listen to it as much on the car rides. I listen to like a podcast now, but I enjoy music a lot.
I grew up playing the piano, and they always said if you can read music and play the piano, you could play any instrument. And I just have to say that is so false. I tried to play guitar, and it did not go well at all.
Yeah. Well, I gotta be honest with you. I can't read music. I played in middle school, and I was teaching myself the piano, but I do it all by ear. I can't read.
So that's really impressive.
Yeah, I kind of play by ear.
For you two musicians, Jesper Horsted plays a lot of different instruments. So, you guys could start a little bit of a trio right here amongst the three of you.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Nicholas, Ryan Poles says you attack the game with an edge. What edge is that? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think the biggest thing I kind of developed it in college was just I'm always competing against my best self, right? So it's not necessarily about who I'm going against. It's not about my opponents. It's not about the competition in the linebacker room or whatever room. It's about myself. So every day I'm looking to get better from yesterday's performance, and that's the biggest thing. So every day I'm looking to get better, and I'm only competing against myself, not necessarily anyone else.
So I read a review, quick but patient. So just to amplify on what Lauren just asked you and about your style of play, are you quick and patient because you're so fast, or is that just the style of play that you have?
That's a great question. So I'll give you this story. My rookie year, we had just played we played the Chargers, and Navarro Bowling was coming to the room the next day. And we were watching the film from the game, and Navarro Bowling was sitting in front of me. And I was running fast, and I overran the play. This is my rookie year. and the VAR woman turns around and says, Nick, slow down. Right. And so from there, I realized that I have to be patient in what I see. So you're right. When you play with a lot of speed, you have to be patient. And then once you know, you can go. And that's something I had to learn with the linebacker coach in Oakland. And once I kind of figured it out, you kind of know when you can go fast and when you can kind of slow down and let the line do the work for you.
You know, Bob Babbitt, you coached the linebackers here one time, Lance Briggs, Urlacher, and that crew. He always used to have a saying, don't go until you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, Nicholas, there's not a lot of guys that are blessed with that type of speed at this level that once they recognize they can go. So, you know, that's a great building block of your ability of building upon your speed.
Yeah, no, exactly. Know until you go. That's a saying you hear a lot. And sometimes if you let the D line kind of do the work for you, you can find right. I mean, you don't have to get in there and put your nose into a 300-pound man if you don't need to. So sometimes the D line can kind of open up holes for you, or maybe you have like a line on in front of you, and you can let the blocking scheme kind of develop, and then you find a crease and you can hit it. So yeah, know until you go is a good tool to have.
You know, not being able to play last year because of that ankle injury, how much hungrier are you now for this season to start?
Yesterday we did one-on-ones, and I was like, I took almost every rep. I don't know, too much, man. So I'm ready to play. It's hard, like you said, watching. I mean, I always like to watch games, right? I come in on off days and kind of watch around the league, kind of see like the turnovers from the league to kind of see what guys are doing. But when you're injured and you sit on the couch all Sunday and you watch every single game, after a while you just want to play. So I'm ready to play.
You know, Nicholas, so when I came to the league, I played in the USFL for 3 years, and then I came to the Bears. And I kind of look at your journey. You know, you go from a Division III Greenville, then you come to the NFL, then you go from Oakland to Las Vegas, where Oakland has a traditional, like Chicago, the fan base and the excitement and everything. Then you didn't know what to expect in Las Vegas. Now you come to the oldest franchise in the history of the NFL. How was the journey to Las Vegas? And is it the same coming to Chicago, or is it different?
I think every season is different. Every approach will be different, right? So even going, like you said, going to Vegas, we had COVID. So like no one was out, we had to be, we couldn't leave, you know what I mean? We had to come in and do testing every day. We didn't have any fans. We're in a brand new stadium, a dome, and they have on, the crowd noise. Like, so everything was different in that situation. So you had to adjust, and then I got hurt. So now I got to adjust again. And so just adjust in Chicago. I've been to Illinois, like I said, I played Greenville there, but the weather is totally different from, to Vegas. And I live in Arizona now, so it's different from Arizona. And so it would have been an adjustment. I think, like I said all the time, it's just preparation. So just preparing, understanding, what's expected of me, what my role will be, and then going from there.
Now you're returning to Illinois. You went to college downstate, the only Greenville University alum to play in the NFL. How much pride do you take in that? And did you get up to Chicago when you were going to school there?
I never went up to Chicago. The only place I went probably east is probably Vandalia, which is like 25 minutes from Greenville. So I never really went that far east. It's awesome. I mean, I think the biggest thing is like going back and seeing some of the players and talk about, they want to play in the league or anything like that. When I came into Greenville, a lot of it was, you're never going to play in the league, you're never going to play in the league. That mentality, that idea of playing in the league was never there. And something I always try to tell them, like when they do ask, hey, I want to play in the league, what should I do? I say, well, I can't tell you what to do because it's not an exact science. But I think the biggest thing is, as long as you're approaching every day as if you are in the NFL, and when the NFL does come calling, you're not surprised. You're prepared for what's coming. So,
Nicholas, I was reading an article, and you said the schemes at Division III football defensively is different than the NFL. What is one of the differences that that you recognized immedately from Division III Greenville to the NFL?
Gap integrity, right? So in college, it wasn't this is your gap. It was find the ball and hit it. So that was the biggest thing, right? Like now I'm tied to a gap. I had this A gap. Well, if the tight end comes across the formation, I got to fall back to the C gap, right? So those are something that we didn't do in college. It was just say wherever the ball is, you go and find it. And then some of the coverages are different as well. Like a lot of our coverages at Greenville with man. And so we do a lot of man principles. But now I come in and say, hey, we got landmarks. You're 1 yard outside the hash, you're 2 yards outside the number, and you're over the top. So like those things we didn't really have as much. A lot of it was man, and a lot of it was find ball, get ball.
Did you have the technology at Greenville that you have at the NFL? Were your practices taped? Did you have the tablet where you could go in and watch yourself? Because I saw where you run a couple plays early in your career, then you'd go back and watch it on video. How did you, how did you welcome that transition of all the technology at your disposal at this level that you didn't have then?
Yeah, so like I said, we didn't have any of that. I think even so you know how we have sideline and end zone view? Some games we didn't even have the end zone view. And I mean, there are some games, well, I'll tell you this story. A scout came to watch practice and watch the games, and he watched one game and he said, I had to throw it out because the field was so bad. Because our field wasn't designed for rain, and so it would just get sloppy. It was just mud. And so a lot of our technology there obviously wasn't the best. And so the biggest adjustment, I think, like you talked about, the tablets on the sideline, and being able to make those adjustments faster than you would have in college. Sometimes we couldn't make adjustments in college until halftime or even after the game. We say, hey, next time we get this coverage, we got to do this. And so being able to make those adjustments faster on the sideline was something that I had to get used to. And it's a part that I actually enjoy, right? So after I play, I go and say, let me see what I did on this. Okay, they got in this formation. I should probably be here. So that part's fun too.
You said studying was a huge part of that transition and part of your football journey. Obviously, it is for every player, but it seemed a little bit different for you. So, how serious did you have to take that, and just what was the process like? And you're a guy who I know still studies the game.
Like I said, I mean, coming into to the NFL, we didn't have we didn't know what's gap integrity. I didn't know what that was. What's a fallback? I didn't know what a fallback was. I didn't know what landmarks were. And so I really just had to learn the game, like learning a new language and spend that time. And you gotta dedicate yourself to your studies. And something that my coach said a lot was, you gotta know it, you gotta learn it, you gotta love it, you gotta study it. So if you don't love the game, you're not gonna study it because it's too much time into it. And so just loving the game, one, helped me, but also dedicating that time and just putting that time aside to say, okay, look, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna study this for however long I'm gonna study it, and then I'll come back to it later. So that's something that I take pride in, for sure.
It all starts Monday with the players being back for the offseason program. What are you expecting? What's the feeling going into that? It's got to be a little bit like first day of school, no?
Oh, it's definitely weird. I mean, this is my first time, since my rookie year, going to a place where I don't know anybody yet. So it'd be fun. I mean, I know a couple of guys, I guess. I know Kari Blasingame, me and him actually grew up together in Huntsville, Alabama. So that'd be nice to meet him again. But I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited to meet my new teammates and earn their respect. I think that's the biggest thing, is earn their respect, coming in humble. I no ego here, just wanting to learn and wanting to get better.
Nicholas, how is it for you to play in crowd noise? Because I know going to Greenville, because I have small colleges in the area where I grew up in. I go to the games, and you can hear players sometimes talking on the sideline. So now you go into Soldier Field, it's going to be a packed house. They're going to be screaming against the opponent's quarterback. And then how has that transition from the noise factor been for you throughout, the early portions of your career?
Yeah, no, it's fun, but at the same time, it is something you have to navigate through, right? Like, how can I communicate to the nickel that on this play you may have to push and learn the 2-3 combinations, right? And so that learning how to communicate without maybe verbal, like maybe you just won't be able to hear me, now I got to use my hand signals. And something that I had to learn in a system where we did more matching, like zone matching and stuff like that. And so that part's fun, but it was an adjustment at first, right? Because like I said, we didn't have that many people at Greenville College, and then I think my first game was against the Titans, and I made a play against DeMarco Murray, and I just heard the crowd go crazy. I was like, wow, this is what it was like. And so it's kind of fun hearing the crowd, but it does impede on your communication. And so maybe sometimes you have to go to hand signals.
Nicholas, why are you playing in the NFL? Because I admire you. And again, going back to my USFL and the NFL, I played against a linebacker named Sam Mills. And Sam Mills was probably 5'8", 225, one of the hardest hitting, best linebackers I ever played against. So why is Nicholas Morrow having this nice long career in the NFL?
Well, I told you, I love the game, right? It's fun to me being out there with my brothers and my teammates, being in the locker room. That's what's fun to me. But making plays, like, I enjoy making plays. I enjoy, sacking the quarterback, the interception, whatever the case may be. I enjoy making plays, running around, having fun. And but being in the locker room, honestly, is one of the biggest things. When you can build a relationship with the guys in the locker room with you. Like, I had a wedding in March. I guess it's just still March, but I had a wedding earlier this year, and I had about 4 or 5 teammates come to the wedding. So that was awesome. And then everyone that was in my wedding party where friends from college. And so you're able to build a community that I don't think you can get outside of the locker room, honestly.
Nick, before we let you go real quick, I just have to ask, because you told me last time I interviewed you, you're quite the chef. What was the meal of the week at the Morrow house?
I didn't make it, honestly, I'll be honest with you, I didn't make it this week, but last week I had these, I did portobello mushrooms as like my bun, and I put some roast beef, some turkey, some tomatoes, and some basil with some marinara and some Swiss, and I put it in the oven. It was really good.
Yeah, that's got to be a new Thayer Brothers menu item there, Tom.
Right. You know, I deep fried a 19-pound turkey this past weekend, and I grew up. My mom always created conversation amongst our family by teaching us to cook, and I'm the same thing with you, Nicholas. I love to cook and I love to experiment.
Yeah, it's fun, man. It's fun.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Nick. We got to take a quick break, but we can't wait to see what you do on the field this year. This is Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. We've got Jim Miller from Sirius XM NFL Radio joining us next, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. Choose clean energy for your home at IGS.com, because every good choice adds up to a better world. Lauren Screeden here in for Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer with you. Tom, time to bring in our good friend, Jim Miller from Sirius XM NFL Radio. Jim, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Good to be with you, Lauren. Tom, always good to talk Bears football this offseason. A lot going on, man.
A lot going on, and some exciting news this week out of the owners' meeting. So the overtime rules will change in the postseason, which was, of course, a hot topic this year. We all know the Bears voted in favor of the new rule that passed. Only 3 teams did not. But Jim, can you take us through that and what it means?
Yes, certainly, Lauren. You know, it was a big deal. We've had some really important games here this postseason, probably none bigger than the Buffalo Bills versus Kansas City in postseason. I mean, who wanted that game to end, and who wanted it to end with just only Kansas City getting a shot at the football? Everybody would have loved to seen Josh Allen have an opportunity. It's basically TV gold. So each team will get a postseason possession. And then after those first 2 possessions, it'll end in sudden death. Won't be in place for the regular season. I think everybody's aware of that. But postseason football, it'll be much more exciting. And you got all these young gun quarterbacks that are really making the game exciting. You want them to get an opportunity to have the football.
Yeah, thoughts and prayers to Josh Allen, who found out that rule changed this week. What do you think, guys? Right call, Tom?
Yeah, I do. I think there had to be some type of change. It was such a controversial point for so long. And, you know, is it the perfect solution? You know, maybe it'll work out to be that way. And I know it's only, like Jim said, during the playoffs, but it'll be interesting to see how it works itself out in the first time that it's used, especially in games of that importance in an NFL season and the playoffs. So it's exciting to see what happens going forward, especially more than one team submitted a plan, but this is what was agreed upon. So, you know, full steam ahead.
For me, I'm more of a traditionalist. I believe in just sudden death, how it always was. And there are a lot of coaches, even guys on the competition committee, like Mike Tomlin, like Stephen Jones is on it of the Dallas Cowboys. And, you know, to me, a game's got to have finality. You know, they were going by the data and the statistics that if you win the coin toss, normally the first team with the first possession had a better chance to winning. But I think we also saw this postseason in the championship game, Cincinnati Bengals defense made a play. They made a play, got off the field. Their offense went on and basically scored with a field goal. So a traditionalist, I'd like to see defense perform as well.
Probably also why the Bengals were one of the 3 teams who voted against that, right?
That's right.
So some more wild news out of Florida before we get to some more Bears stuff. But Bruce Arians retiring. Todd Bowles takes over as Tampa Bay's head coach. And I got to say, guys, when I got that alert to my phone, I was a little surprised that Bruce was retiring. How'd you feel about it?
You know, I was kind of a little confused because more of the timing of Tom Brady coming back. But like Bruce Arians said in his press conference, is probably the perfect time to hand it over to Todd Bowles, who I'm really excited for because the first time he went through the Jets experiment, you know, that's less than less than a supporting cast that can really show how good of a coach Todd Bowles is. Bruce Arians, 69 years old. He's been involved in football forever. So if you're going to hand the baton to the next likely candidate, I am excited for Todd Bowles to get his opportunity. But it's, what will that do for Tom Brady? Will he have more of an impact on the offense? Or, will this be a defensive-centric team and Tom Brady still being the great quarterback that he has been?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I don't think there's some sinister plot here in why they handed it over. They're trying to set Todd Bowles up for success. When Bruce Arians originally came over from the Arizona Cardinals, he had the health issues. All right, so this was discussed. This plan was in place. This succession plan is the right time because it does set up Todd Bowles and that entire staff that has been together the entire time Bruce Arians has been there. It sets them up for the best success possible. You've got a record-setting quarterback rather than, say, go through the growing pains of a young Kyle Trask, who they just drafted a season ago. So it's really, like Tom said, the best time for everybody. And that's a good football team. They're probably going to walk through the NFC South and they'll be one of the top teams, probably them, a team like the Rams, the Green Bay, who could be challenging through the NFC come playoff time.
And for Bruce Arians too, guys, I mean, he's spent 50 years on the sideline, 69 years old, like you said, Tom. You got to have some, I know he'll still have a front office job, but to enjoy retirement a little bit, I mean, he's earned it. And even if he did make it back to a Super Bowl, that team, I know each Super Bowl team is special, but to have won it with Brady, Gronk, I mean, that whole crew, you can't really recreate that. Am I right?
Yeah, I think when you look at guys coming out of retirement like Gronk, it shows you the type of respect that Bruce Arians has earned around the league. And he's had success. So I guess now it's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor, of everything that you've dedicated. When you're a coach from the beginning to the end, you're putting in 18-hour days, 7 days a week once the season starts. So in order for Bruce Arians to leave this team in the position they're in, to hand it over to a quality coach like Todd Bowles. Listen, man, I'm a Bears fan and I want to see the Bears win, but it's going to be interesting to see how that whole dynamic works itself out.
Yeah, Bruce is a lifer. And it was funny because I talked to Todd Bowles yesterday on SiriusXM NFL Radio. They don't even know his job title yet for Bruce Arians. So right. he called him the ambassador. He could be a senior analyst. He goes, the most he can help me with right now is prepping me for the offensive players come draft time, because all Todd Bowles been doing is diving into the defensive players. So it was somewhat of a shock to Todd Bowles. But at the same time, it was known that at some point this was going to happen. This just happens to be the right time to do it when you've got Tom Brady, Gronk, guys that Tom talked about. It really can help recruit guys to join that Tampa Bay Buccaneer team this offseason.
All right, guys, we've got plenty of Bears stuff coming up. We got to take a quick time out, but Bears senior writer Larry Mayer has lots of Bears news from the owners' meetings. Joining us after the break. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back. This segment of Bears All Access is brought to you by Athletico Physical Therapy. Visit athletico.com to request an appointment in clinic or virtually and start feeling better tomorrow. Welcome back to Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. Lauren Screeden, Tom Thayer, and Jim Miller here with you. And a very special guest is joining us, Bears senior writer Larry Mayer, who was enjoying the sunshine all week. I mean, working, right, Larry? Down at the owners' meetings. Thanks for being here on Bears All Access.
Thanks for having me. And Jim Miller can vouch for me because I saw him down there as well.
Okay, good. We were going to check on that. I mean, you couldn't have picked a better week to be away from Chicago weather than this one. It was miserable and snowing this year. So I'm happy for you that you were down there. What did you learn?
Thank you very much, Lauren. Yeah, it was very interesting because Ryan Poles, Matt Eberflus, and George McCaskey all addressed a small group of reporters. And Ryan talked a lot about his plan and how he's executed it in free agency. And the thing I like most about Ryan Poles is he's intelligent, and I think he has a firm grasp of reality. And that's something that Bear fans should be very happy about because he understands the situation here. And in terms of the Bears being more than one or two players away from being a championship contender. And they went into free agency with 27 of their own unrestricted guys. So he knew that there was a lot of jobs to fill. He formulated a plan really to go after guys in the second and third waves of free agency, seeking value and really looking for players that were motivated to prove that maybe they deserve bigger contracts. And I think he's done a really good job of that. so far they've signed 10 guys from other teams, and there's a lot of guys that can come in and help out.
So Larry, when you're at the meetings and then we all find out that Trevor Siemian is coming aboard, now publicly they put out there that they are looking to make a deal with Nick Foles. So is this probably one of the bigger signings for the Bears when you talk about experience behind a young quarterback like Justin?
I mean, I think it certainly could be one of the bigger signings. Obviously, in the ideal world, Justin Fields develops and learns and starts all 17 games this year. But having a number 2 quarterback that can step in and win a couple games for you is obviously a big deal for the Bears. And yeah, they chose Trevor Siemian. And actually, Ryan Poles was very candid about it at the meeting, saying that they felt that he was a better fit than Nick Foles as the number 2 quarterback. And Trevor Siemian's a guy that started 29 games over 6 years. And one of the things that the Bears like about him is that he's learned from behind as a backup behind Peyton Manning and Drew Brees in Denver and New Orleans. And this is a guy who he was on Denver's team when they won the Super Bowl. Then when Peyton Manning retired, it's a very interesting trivia question. He became the first quarterback to ever start a game, the season opener for a defending Super Bowl champion that had never played before in the NFL. So that was pretty interesting. He's got the experience, and I think it's a good signing. And obviously somewhat of a local guy, having gone to Northwestern, even though he's not from here originally.
Well, Larry, let me ask you this: it was good to see you down in Florida, but as the Bears now walk away from those meetings, will their attention still be in the third phase of free agency, or does all attention go towards the NFL draft now for the Chicago Bears?
No, I would say that Ryan Poles said they're going to remain aggressive in free agency. So I expect the players to continue to filter in. Like I said, they had 27 unrestricted guys. They've signed 10, and they only re-signed 2 of their own players in free agency. And one of them was a long snapper, and Patrick Scales, and the other one was DeAndre Houston Carson, who obviously he's a guy that's getting better every year and has really contributed on defense the last 2 years, especially. So in answer to your question, no, I expect it to be a dual focus. I think they're not going to forget about free agency. There's still a lot of guys out there that are value people that can come in and have a role with the team. And obviously they've also this whole time been planning for the draft. And that's going to be real interesting to see, especially after they added a 2nd-round pick in the trade for Khalil Mack.
Larry, you said Coach Eberflus had a lot of good things to say about the new free agents, a lot of excitement there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked a little bit about everybody, and it's interesting to see that so out of the 10 guys, 6 have been on offense and 4 have been on defense. And obviously Matt Eberflus has a defensive background, but as a head coach, he has to worry about both sides of the ball now. But the kid from Indianapolis, Muhammad, is really a guy to watch, I think, because he played for Matt Eberflus the last 4 years in Indianapolis. He really came into his own last year at defensive end. He recorded career bests in pretty much every statistical category. And really, Matt Eberflus, it was interesting. He said that he's the guy that everyone's going to look to in terms of it's one thing to know the system, but he knows how everything is done in the system. So he's going to be a guy that they bring in, kind of like Lucas Patrick on the other side of the ball with his experience with Luke Getsy in Green Bay. But Muhammad's going to be a guy that really he can kind of be a resource to the other defensive players who want to know all about Matt Eberflus and his system and really the expectations that come with it.
You know, Larry, they missed out on Ryan Bates. I thought that was almost a penciled-in starter that they could have brought in here. Buffalo matches the offer, and then he goes back up there. So are they resetting their sights on a veteran offensive line? Because there's been a lot of conversation about what Ryan Poles wants his offensive lineman to look like. But then, I guess you have to have more competitive pieces in place.
Yeah, well, what he said about that after what Ryan Poles said after the Buffalo Bills matched the offer sheet was that he just has to adapt and adjust and move on to the next guy. And they have rankings just like they do for the draft with the free agency in terms of grades and priority. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them add another offensive lineman in free agency. And Tom, you're a guy who could talk obviously better than any of us about the type of attitude that you need to play on the offensive line. But another interesting thing to me is that ever since he's been hired, Ryan Poles has talked about how it's important to have a nasty attitude playing in the trenches, and that Lucas Patrick really epitomizes that type of attitude. And really, like I said before, Poles is very candid about saying he doesn't think that attitude existed really before he arrived here, and that's something he wants to instill. And like I said, Tom, you could probably talk to how that kind of functions on the offensive line.
I just like how he talks about the template, the size and the structure of what he wants to see out of an offensive lineman. You know, Jim, when you talk about the requirement on offensive linemen to be heavy, listen, you have to allow an offensive lineman to be in their most competitive frame that they like to play in.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you look at, the Bears tried to put an offer sheet out there to really tighten the screws to the Buffalo Bills. Let's be honest, Buffalo's been pretty active with Von Miller. They bring in Jordan Phillips. They were tight in terms of the bootstraps and the money they could offer, be able to go to match the Bears offer. So they're able to do it with a couple of strokes of the pen. They cleared up some space in order to do it. Where I want to move, Larry, is talking about Larry Ogunjobi, because the Bears clearly targeted the defensive tackle from Cincinnati. This guy's still out there now. Ryan Poles talked about it. It broke his heart down at the owners' meetings that he had to tell him, hey, you failed your physical. But is it time with this man? Does he have to get just a little bit more healthy? Where is that at? Because maybe that's something that could be approached again when you look at Larry Ogunjobi.
Right. I mean, I have no idea in terms of his status about how far along he is with his injury, but Ryan Poles did not close the door. He said the door is still open to possibly adding him down the line somewhere. And one of the things that impressed me was the fact that after the whole situation occurred, instead of doubling down and still signing him, Ryan Poles knew how it would appear on the outside, and he still knew that the best thing for the Bears was not offering him a contract at the time. And again, that's another thing that Bear fans, I think, should be very happy about in terms of Ryan Poles and the way he's operating.
Larry, you had a chance to talk with Bears chairman George McCaskey down there in Palm Beach. What did he have to say?
Well, the first thing he was talking about how impressed he was with how Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus have gone about putting together the plan for free agency and the draft, and also putting together the coaching staff. And he was especially talking about Ryan Poles and his discipline and how impressed he was with how he basically created this plan and he's sticking to it. I think there's a human nature where you want to come in and impress when you're new on the job. And he could have just gone out and thrown money at some big name free agent, and maybe that guy doesn't work out and you're kind of cash strapped down the line. But he pretty much set out his plan, and he was very on. George talked about how honest he was in his assessment of the roster, that it wasn't really that great. And George appreciated that honesty and his candor. And like I said, George was really impressed that he stuck with that and he's been patient. And George used the words discipline several times about that and being calculated and assessing the free agent market and also the value of some of the players and really getting some of those guys in here that really have a chip on their shoulder. And guys, it's kind of interesting to me, and maybe you guys could speak of this. Three of the guys that they've signed, and really some of their priority guys and the bigger names, Lucas Patrick, Byron Pringle, and Nicholas Morrow, all were guys that have had success in the league after entering it as undrafted free agents. And I think that chip on the shoulder is something that's real.
I agree. I like guys on 1-year contracts, and you have a guy that it's a little bit more difficult to pave his way into the NFL, but then able to sustain that opportunity in the NFL. So I'm excited to see how they grow and develop. And I like the fact that some of these guys are really familiar to the coaches. Luke Eske's going to be really familiar with Lucas Patrick and some of the other guys that were in the same division as the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, they'll be able to get some things cranked up with St. Brown. And you mentioned Patrick. Offensively, they can really get the offense up and running because they have familiarity with what Luke Getsy is doing. Let me ask you this, Larry, from a coaching standpoint, because the Bears have new coaches and Matt Eberflus and the staff is now put together. What's the offseason schedule? How quickly can they really get their hands on these guys, start to go through the phases of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 to really, because it's really about the install right now and getting guys up to speed as well as, strong and getting in shape.
Teams that have new head coaches can start their offseason programs 2 weeks ahead of the teams that have returning head coaches. And it's real interesting this year. I don't remember an offseason like this. I think 10 of the 32 teams are going to have new head coaches. That period, that period begins Monday. So we're talking about just in a few days here. The Bears are going to be reporting for their voluntary offseason program and meeting all the coaches. And Matt Eberflus is going to formally introduce himself and his coaches to the guys. It's for the first 2 weeks, the coaches cannot appear on the field with the players. So basically it's a lot of meeting time. So they can meet with the players, go over the playbook, talk to them about expectations. And in terms of the players, they're basically working on the field by themselves, doing conditioning work. And they can also work, I know Tom Thayer's favorite aspect of football, work out in the weight room. So yeah, things get started. I mean, we were joking down there in Florida about there's really no offseason in the NFL anymore. And the offseason program begins Monday. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens. And I'll be there reporting from Hallis Hall.
All right, Larry, we are looking forward to that. We've got to take a quick break, but thanks so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom as always. It's always fun chatting with you. You're listening to Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. We'll be right back. The Miller Lite Bears draft party is back at Soldier Field with on-field access and locker room tours. Tickets on sale now at chicagobears.com/draft party. Welcome back to Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. Lauren Screeden, Tom Thayer, and Jim Miller here. Now, we just left Larry talking about the off-season program starting on Monday, which is crazy because it's already April and time flies. Now, we didn't fall for any April Fool's jokes today, did we, guys?
Not yet.
Nah, not yet.
Okay, good.
Thank goodness.
All right. Believe nothing today. But do you expect full participation? What do you expect to see Monday at Hallis Hall?
Well, to me, because that was the biggest question mark last year, I think Roquan Smith was the only veteran defensive player that showed up for the voluntary OTAs. I think if you were on give a good indicator to the new staff, both Ryan Poles and his staff and Matt Eberflus and his staff, that you are a fully committed Chicago Bear and you're here to compete and earn your opportunity, then, show up. They're not being unfair about asking you to be there. But when you're talking about developing a roster, developing your specific position, developing in a relationship with the coaches inside the classroom, you got to put yourself in a position where they see the commitment that they expect of you.
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I think it's about the commitment. It's about building camaraderie. And let's be honest, there are no sacred cows. There's maybe one or two players that are, legit that can probably, miss some practices. I think it's about making a good impression. And these coaches want to be impressed because, quite honestly, the record hasn't been good enough. So, like I said, I don't think there are any sacred cows other than guys like Roquan, maybe Robert Quinn, maybe Jalen Johnson, maybe a guy like Cody Whitehair. But other than that, or Justin Fields would be in that list as well. But they're all going to be there. And I think Justin knows by default, he's got to be a leader and show that commitment and really make one of the biggest jumps of anybody on the team. So I think if you're dedicated, you love football, you want to show you care, you want to make a good impression, make a good commitment to your teammates, and hopefully it will translate to success come the fall.
When we talked with Nicholas Morrow earlier in the show, he said it's a little bit like first day of school vibes. He got a big grin when he was talking about it. And, I bring up Nicholas Morrow. It's going to be really interesting to see how his relationship develops between him and Roquan, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. And one of the things that Matt Eberflus recently said when they brought in the new safety from Tennessee is he wants interchangeable position players so they can move all around. So you're not like a one-dimensional. And when you think about the speed of Roquan Smith and now the speed of Nicholas Morrow, you're talking about two linebackers that can run as well as any position on the field. So if they develop a relationship, the camaraderie that Jim just talked about, I think you could have a 1-2 speed punch at the linebacker position that you can formulate and develop a plan around.
Yeah, and a big part of that is sometimes the communication is the unspoken word. It's just a gesture. It's a body idiosyncrasy, or maybe a signal that you make with your hands. It doesn't have to always be a spoken word that you're communicating to your teammate. They're going to see by your demeanor. They're going to see how you line up, how maybe you position guys with the up front with the slap on the fanny, things like that. That now you have that same line of communication and you're thinking the same way where you're all on the same page. So Nicholas Morrow has played a lot of football. And so those two have to gel. They're going to be a big part of the Bears defense and how well they succeed here this fall.
You know, Jim, when we talk about the similarities, and Lauren, when we talk about the similarities between the Lovie Smith system and what they're going to install here, it wasn't a foregone conclusion where Brian Urlacher was going to play or where they were going to play Lance Briggs. They kind of fit into with the position that ultimately the defensive coordinator, linebacker coach figured that they could use their assets the best. And I still think there's a little bit of unknown of where these guys are going to fit best according to their new role in a different style defense than what Roquan's played in the last couple of years. And I guess there's similarities to what Nicholas Morrow's coming from.
All right, guys, time for another quick break, but we'll be right back right after this on Bears All Access. Don't go anywhere. This segment of Bears All Access is brought to you by CDW, people who get it. Welcome back to Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. Lauren Screeden, Tom Thayer, and Jim Miller here with you. Now, we talked a little bit about Ryan Poles making a lot of free agent moves, but how do you set up Justin Fields for success if you're Ryan Poles?
You got a quarterback, go first.
Well, I'm always big. I'm always big on veteran wide receivers, and I think when you look at you sign guys like Pringle on the outside, you're going to have obviously young players that are going to continue to step up for the Bears. Whether it's the tight end position with Cole Kmet, the receivers that have been there, they need to step up because they're considered veterans now. They're not like newbies anymore. But I think it's veterans on the outside, veterans up front on the offensive line are going to be key. Yes, they've got some young developmental guys, but you're going to have to really rely on a guy like Cody Whitehair. To me, the running backs, Khalil Herbert, he's not a rookie anymore. He's got to step up from that standpoint. You've got Montgomery. So you've got veterans around him that I think really are going to bring him along from that standpoint. And he's got to do his own part. For Justin Fields, he's got to dive into this playbook. He's got to know protections extremely well. He's got to know the checks at the line of scrimmage. We talked to Luke Getsy and how he's going to install the offense for Justin Fields, but he's really going to have to jump a level in terms of his understanding defenses, understanding protections to protect himself, and really just know the entirety of the play. And some things are going to be new. They're going to be new concepts. So he's going to have to spend the extra time to make sure he dots all the I's and crosses all the T's. So he's prepared on every single down.
Jim, one question I would like to ask you, what is the key ingredient for a quarterback to learn before the ball ever gets to his hands or ever leaves his hand? Is it reading the line of scrimmage? Is it reading safeties to the line of scrimmage? Or is it understanding blitz vulnerability?
Yeah, I think on every play, it's different. If you've got a run play that's maybe a check with me, you're going to always look through the front, through the linebackers. And it's really about numbers now, because a play you're going to say, if you got 4 guys on one side, five guys on the other on the defensive front, you're going to run away at the 4 players. So it's about numbers. So knowing the checks. So I think fronts are imperative. When you start to get into the pass plays, same thing. You look at front, you look at linebackers. Now you're looking at coverage. Each is going to give you an indicator. Say if it's a cover 3 and I've got out routes called, normally that's an indicator. I'm going to read away from the strong safety and hit the backside out route. But in order to do that, I got to make sure I'm protected up front. Are they bringing too strong with the protection that I'm in, or maybe I've got to throw it hot and I won't have time to get to that out route. So there's a lot going on in terms of processing the information, but it's always the defensive front through the linebackers, then to the safety, or then to the secondary. And there's going to be a pre-snap read and a post-snap read, and you got to be able to digest it all.
Guys, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are out of time. But thanks so much for letting me join you. Let's do it again sometime.
Well, it's fun having you fill in, Lauren. You're a lot better than Jeff. I'm kidding.
Oh, stop. JJ will be back with you next week, but it was an honor to fill in for him. Thanks everybody for listening. Join the guys next week on Bears All Access, brought to you by IGS Energy. For Tom Thayer, Jim Miller, and myself, plus our wonderful producers behind the scenes. We'll see you next week. Have a good night.